User interfaces have gone graphic, business correspondence has gone graphic, and now programming itself is going graphic. This is Multiscope, a graphic debugger for OS/2. This is not your father's Oldsmobile. This is a new generation of programming tools, environments, and languages. Today, we take a look at the new object-oriented programming languages on this edition of the Chronicles.
The Computer Chronicles is made possible in part by the Software Publishers Association, which reminds you that software piracy is a federal offense. When a few people steal software, everyone loses.
Downloading films is stealing. If you do it, you will face the consequences.
Welcome to the Computer Chronicles. I'm Stuart Chaffee, and with me this week is Jan Lewis. Jan, we're talking about object-oriented programming languages, a new approach to programming. This is an interesting example I have over here. It's a relatively simple program called
Brainfuck.
Program, even though you don't know anything about programming, it automatically writes the code for you. For example, I just get into a dialogue here. I say, I want to W, write a program. What do I want to do? Well, let's say I want to use a math command. Which one? Let's say I want to generate a random number. I hit 2.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Let's say a random number from 0 to 1, I hit 1, assign it to a variable, I'll say X, and there's the line of code it's written for me. I don't really know what the code is. Jan, we're talking about, as I said, the OOP languages now, and it's a little bit complicated, I know, but can you explain in simple terms what is object-oriented programming compared to old-fashioned procedural programming?
Sure. Technically speaking, this is not an object-oriented language.
When you talk about programming languages, one company's name comes to mind, and that's Borland. Borland, of course, made a business of selling Turbo C, Turbo Pascal, now Turbo Debugger and Turbo Assembler. We begin with a visit to Borland headquarters in Scotts Valley, California.
Borland is now advancing what it considers the next revolution in software design, called object-oriented programming.
I think maybe one of the first benefits is the fact that object-oriented programming forces careful software architecture. When you're building a piece of software, one of the most difficult things, if you're on your own, is force yourself to just think about it a lot. Architect the house before you start building it.
Joining us in the studio now is George's co-founder and vice president of Digitalk. Next to George, Bruce Newberger with the Whitewater Group. Jan?
Bruce, before we even get started, there's two types of object-oriented programming languages. One is the sort of the pure type, the one that was built from ground up to be object-oriented.
Well, that all depends on the person's background, but we found that if someone completely jumps feet first into object-oriented programming, it's sink or swim, and most often they
drown.
Well, Smalltalk, and this is a particular implementation for Presentation Manager, is a pure object-oriented language. It pioneered a lot of the concepts in object-oriented programming, and that's why it's gathered a lot of interest over the years.
In fact, this goes way back, doesn't it?
Oh,
to
yes.
Xerox PARC days and so on.
PARC days and so forth.
All right, show us how you would use Smalltalk 5 here.
Well, in this particular window, it's graphics demonstration windows. We can do various things. We can draw pictures. These particular pictures you're seeing are generated by the underlying Presentation Manager graphics models. This piece of text is generated by the underlying outline font technology inside Presentation Manager. But what we've done here is we've actually surfaced the, this is an object that we can manipulate. In this case, I can drag it around and actually throw it much as a Frisbee. But one of the things that's very interesting about object-oriented environments, in particular in Smalltalk, that I like is the ability to modify things even while things are running. So what I'd like to do is go in and maybe draw something slightly different here.
Okay.
And to do that, what we have to do is locate the piece of code that is doing what we're seeing and then change it.
There it is.
Because I am not necessarily the world's greatest typist, we'll go and it's finished with the compilation process now, and it's dynamically bound into the system, so we can now try and run this piece of code. What I'm doing now is asking to execute it, and at this point it's going out to the outline font and rendering this new string that we put in.
There it is.
And there it is, read as we hoped, slightly smaller, but longer.
And it's another object, and you can play
It's
with it
another
just like
object.
the
I
first
can
one.
pick it up just like
That's
the first
great.
one, manipulate it and throw it.
Tell us how that's different from what we've just seen here in terms of an OOP language.
Okay, well, it's very similar to the way we use object-oriented programming. It's the environment that's somewhat different. We run in Microsoft Windows, which can generally run on a smaller machine. And our syntax is a little more traditional, so C and Pascal programmers can find it very readable.
Run us through Actor 2.0 here and show us how we would use that.
Okay, sure. This is our new version. And it comes up right in Windows. It is itself a Windows program. And
Okay, what do we look
that creates a new window.
Okay.
This is called an edit window. We press the window object window. The next thing I'm going to do is create another type of window called a chart window, our browser window. And now, as soon as I go back to my chart window and it starts to redraw, I get the Hello World dialog box, and I've now actually changed the program.
Right.
And this is a program called Actor.
Bruce, thank you very much. Now, of course, object-oriented programming takes place in other than the PC-compatible Windows and Presentation Manager environments. For the Macintosh, there's Mac App and a new software development system called ProGraph. Here's a report.
The graphic interface of the Mac often confuses people into thinking that is the object-oriented programming.
There's a tendency sometimes for people to say, well, the Macintosh is an object-oriented computer because it has all these graphic objects lying around on the screen.
Working with ProGraph requires learning a different style of thinking, but once you get it, you can easily and quickly build a complex application. For the Computer Chronicles, I'm Maria Gabriel.
Joining us in the studio now is Bill Edwards, group leader for the Next project at Frame Technology Corporation. Next to Bill, Sam Drucker, R&D manager for Zortec Incorporated. Jan?
Bill, you're developing products using Objective-C, which is fundamentally an object-oriented extension of an existing language, C. Can you give me background on why you're using an object-oriented language?
Well, the major advantage of object-oriented programs in general is their ability to encapsulate the complexity of a program into objects, such that a programmer can ask an object to perform an action without knowing how that object will implement it.
Sam?
Yes, absolutely. When you use object-oriented programming, you can use an object interface, thus separating things from parts that they really don't need to know about. For instance, a graphics system classically could be called through an object, and the caller has no idea how such things are implemented.
Okay, again, so you can deal with that object, not really have to know what's going on underneath, but just tell it, here's what I want to accomplish.
That's right. It knows how to display itself.
Yeah.
It knows how to move itself.
How does it make the development of software different?
It makes the development of software different in that your programs are much more compartmentalized. That is, the details that are pertinent to one section of the program never appear in a section of the program.
You pretty much have to be a C programmer to use it?
Yes, C is really the first step into C++.
Okay, describe what you're doing on the screen now, Sam.
If I had a C program called thing.c, then this command would change a C program into a C++ program.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, it's not too hard to figure that out. What are the benefits to an end user of having developers have access to object-oriented programming languages?
Well, in the particular case of Objective-C, it has something called dynamic binding, and what this means is the product that gets delivered to customers is a combination of the code that we have written has delivered. If Next decides at a later date that they want to improve their code, all they need to do is to send customers these updated objects, and suddenly FrameMaker benefits from it. Its behavior changes because we're using the objects that Next has shipped to their customers.
And Sam, what's the next step here in making, object-oriented programming is such a nice move forward to make it easier to manipulate code. What would happen next, do you think?
Well, it's always hard to say what's going to come next in the computer industry.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. That's our look at object-oriented programming languages. We'll be back in just a minute with this week's computer news.
In the random access file this week, Hewlett-Packard used the LaserJet 3. According to HP, this LaserJet printer offers higher print quality, font scaling, and faster graphics, all at $300 less than the LaserJet 2. The LaserJet 3 is compatible with the 2 series and costs under $2,400.
Since your desktop is one of the older machines, the chances are the diskettes that it uses will not fit into your laptop. Once you've got them connected together, you'll need to use some kind of utility program like LapLink 3 to connect the files from one to the other. For the Computer Chronicles, I'm Dr. John.
Hewlett-Packard is the first to offer a compute with 2 megabytes of RAM. Prices range from $10,000 to $20,000. 20-some years ago, Timothy Leary encouraged the use of drugs for mind expansion. Now he says computers serve the same purpose. Leary says instead of drugs, today he uses computers to explore and discover his brain.